Hello to this third edition of the Parampara Family Business Series Symposium. Namaste, friends, well-wishers, ladies and gentlemen. Warm greetings, and I hope we have a great session ahead. I'm sure we will do. We have about 1,082 registrations today across the world from 14 countries. Parampara Family Business Institute is a not-for-profit social initiative. Our mission is to reach out to family businesses through awareness, education, and research. The topic for the symposium today is based on the book, How We Change and 10 Reasons Why We Don't, by Dr. Ross Ellenhorn. The synopsis of this book has been sent to all of you. I'm sure you've had the opportunity to look at it. This book is path-breaking and very refreshing. It takes a deep dive, a scuba dive, if you may, into the dynamics that influence all human change. Dr. Ellenhorn has dedicated the last 2 decades to helping individuals suffering psychiatric symptoms to find the psychological and social means for remaining outside institutional settings and integrating them into their communities. Ross is a clinician and internationally acclaimed thought leader in the mental health and addiction field. Before we commence the conversations with him, I have the pleasure to welcome Mr. G.M. Rao. Mr. G.M. Rao personifies transformative change. From a serial entrepreneur to a corporate strategist to an institution builder. To quote him, if the founder and the senior generation of a family business do not change and evolve with emerging times, this will become a bottleneck rather than a lifeline to the family and the business. An ardent philanthropist and the group chairman of the multi-business conglomerate GMR Group, presenting Mr. G.M. Rao.
Thank you, PM. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. And namaste, Ross Ellenhorn. Namaste. I welcome you once again to the third session of our learning journey on family businesses. Last week, we had another very successful session with a participant from 8 countries. Nearly 80% of the participants rated the session as very good to outstanding. It pleases me to know this global learning platform of Parampara Family Business Institute under our not-for-profit GMR Foundation is benefiting several people from across the globe. The excellent reviews and feedback of participants inspires and motivates us to continue our journey of awareness, education, and research on family governance. In the second session last week, Rachel Atkins and David Imson, global experts on reputation and management, shared insights on how to protect and enhance the reputation of business families and family members. They shared insights from their research and practice on the risks and potential of the online space, including social media. In the new age, where every piece of information, personal and professional, is available on the click of a button. It is important to learn the skill of managing our digital footprints. While the law protects our privacy, it is really up to an individual to be careful about exposing himself or herself on the virtual platforms. Particularly, the young members of families are required to be educated to understand that their individual and family information is private, should be kept safe. As per legitimate proponents of the transparency, there are hackers out there to serve their purpose. And we hear such cases quite often. In today's hyper-connected world, almost everything is tracked and recorded in some form and can always be distorted and wrongly used. Friends, reputation once damaged is difficult to repair and restore. Today, we have another very interesting topic, how we change, by Dr. Ross Ellenhorn, a renowned sociologist, psychotherapist, and social worker. Change is something in which I personally believe in very strongly. As they say, change is the only constant in today's volatile and unsettled world. In the context of family businesses, continuous change and adaptability are essential, especially when new generation enters the businesses. The new internet generation comes with very different ideas and way of working, which demands a major change in the way of doing businesses. At the same time, the founder needs to change himself and find a balance to accommodate new generation's ideas, way of working. The family businesses fail to change, then it is a matter of time before they perish. Moreover, in the current ever-changing complex world, adapting to change is a paramount. Look at what the current corona pandemic has done. Almost every human being on the planet is now compelled to change his or her behavior, be it a social distancing, working from home, wearing masks, maintaining proper hygiene, and focusing on health and increasing immunity. Though the current changes are for survival, but there are many other changes which everyone needs to incorporate in his daily life for a betterment and a growth. As a matter of fact, many of us are not very good in this. This is where I welcome Dr. Ellenhorn to provide his valuable perspective on understanding and overcoming our resistance to change. This will help us immensely to embrace the change not only in our family businesses, but also in our personal lives. I hope that Parampara Family Business Institute, with these curated sessions by globally renowned experts on the subject, will benefit small, medium, and upcoming family businesses. I wish you enjoy the learning session today. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Dear viewers, the broad structure for this session, we will be in conversation with Dr. Ross for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then dedicate the next 10 to 15 minutes for question and answers. We have so many registrations. Our apologies if we are unable to answer all these questions or many of them. Okay, so Ross, hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
It's good to see you again.
Ross.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Delighted.
Oh, it's an honor. Yeah, thank you.
Ross, we're going to talk about your book, as you know. But before that, it'll be nice to understand you as its author. Share with us your worldview, mission, the key tenets of your work.
the target for me in most of what I do may sound strange at first, but that target is play. That having playful experiences, in my mind, is central to really our survival. That what I mean by play is the ability to take things that feel like they're solid and unmovable and find ways to move them, and to do that in a collaborative way. And I actually believe that our evolution has brought us to a place where that's the central thing that makes us human. That what's called the neocortex, this front of our brain, is built for these events where we collaborate together and where we invent together. And that our species basically survives on collaborating in order to invent and innovate, and that takes play. And that's what you and I are doing today. We're engaged in a playful event because we're going to play with ideas. We're going to improvise a bit. So you and I are on a play date. We're spending time just like two children playing in childhood. We're doing the same, but we're doing an adult version. And it's my belief that that's the central thing we should all be working towards, because it's really what we're built to do. And it's glorious. It's a wonderful event to be able to play.
Great, great. As you talked of play, I thought of the lightness of being. There's the lightness of being.
Yeah.
Just passed through my mind, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to say and so difficult to achieve.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. Yep. Let's move on to the book. But before that,
Mm-hmm.
Ross, so much has been written about change.
Mm-hmm.
Who moved my cheese? 10 steps to assertiveness,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So how did you happen to write this book in the midst of all this clutter?
Well, I'm glad you call it clutter. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit of story about myself, if that's okay.
Yes.
Because it kind of brings us to how I came up with these ideas. So it's a story that goes way back, which was that I was in my childhood. I went to a grammar school, a grade school that was very creative. It was based really, this is the 1960s in California. It was a kind of a hippie school, and creativity was really supported. It was really kind of the central life of that school. And they didn't spend a lot of time thinking about math and reading and spelling and those sorts of things. And I went from that school to a typical high school, junior high school, where they did have those expectations, and where I immediately got diagnosed as having a severe learning disability. And that had a profound effect on me. It had a profound effect on my ability to hope regarding the future, to have some sense that I could hope for things and that hope wasn't dangerous. I began to see hoping as a scary event, because before that time, hope was this thing that brought me so much good, and now it was bringing me all this disappointment. And that stuck with me for years. And one day, as a social worker, I was running this group, and I asked these patients, these are patients who have suffered from severe psychiatric events and have been in and out of institutions all their lives, what gets in the way of change? And not a single one of those patients mentioned their psychiatric issue. They mentioned struggles over the fear of raising expectations, the fear of trying again and being disappointed. And so I came up with this idea of the 10 reasons not to change. And that became, because it was the 10 reasons they came up with, that became kind of the work I began to do with these clients. And that continued throughout my work. It continued in my first book, which was about people who, when they get their hopes up, end up falling apart and going in the hospital. And then it ended up in my second book. And from there, from that second book, I began to do some research at Rutgers University, and we've been able to really figure out that there is a thing called fear of hope. It's an actual variable in all of our lives. And that variable is not depression, it's not anxiety, it's not fear of failure, it's not fear of success, it's its own thing. And so that's kind of the central part of my thinking now. Now, what I believe is that it's better to look at why we don't change than to follow advice on how to change. That looking at why we fear change, what are the things holding us back, gets us further ahead than following someone's advice. And I can fill you in further on why that is as we go along. But it's clear to me that too much advice actually doesn't work. You know, in the United States, the fitness industry is a $65 billion industry. 67% of the people that follow fitness advice fail at it. Diet's the same thing. Alcoholics Anonymous has a 5 to 8% effective rate. So all of these things we do to help people change, they actually have little effect. The stronger event in our life is the thing that pulls us towards sameness. So why don't we look at that a bit and understand sameness instead of change? And that's sort of my basic parameters around the book. I've lost your sound.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. You speak of sameness and spend quite a lot of focus on that. Mm-hmm. And very interestingly, being an Indian, I was struck with your metaphor. Brahman, Shiva, and Vishnu. Brahman, the creator. Shiva, the destroyer to create again. Mm-hmm. And Vishnu, the preserver. And then you say, sameness is the Vishnu in all of us. I was struck by that, mostly because I'm an Indian, and the metaphor was very striking as I read it. Tell us more about sameness. It's so important.
Well, first of all, you telling me I did okay with that?
Yes, for whatever little I know.
Good. Well, the part of us that keeps us the same is the same part of us that tells us to put on our seatbelt. It's not a bad part of us, and it's really comes out of self-love. It comes out of our wish to preserve ourselves, because change is scary, and change is risky. And if we look at change as the only option, we end up making sameness bad. It's ugly. You shouldn't be the same. And if you do that, you're cutting out an entire part of your life. And what we know from the science on change is that change comes out of contemplation, not out of advice. And contemplation means weighing the pros and cons of a situation. And in this advice culture, all we get is change as a pro. We never discuss staying the same as a pro. And you're more likely to change if you say, well, what are the good reasons why I'm staying the same? Why am I doing this? Can I actually build some affection for my sameness? Can I see my sameness as coming out of self-love? I may not want it in my life, but it's not a bad thing, right? It comes out of me taking care of myself.
So just a quick one here. You talk of contemplation. Is this intellectual contemplation? Is this logical contemplation? Is it an emotive contemplation?
Well, the science on change, what they're referring to as contemplation, is a sort of dispassionate weighing of pros and cons. So we know that some of the best ways to help people with addiction is for them to talk about the good side of addiction, not to act like that's dangerous, but what's good about your addiction? What has it gotten you? Now, dispassionately looking at that and then looking at what it might get you to not be engaged in the addictive behavior leads more efficiently towards change than saying you're an addict, it's a disease, it's bad, you're doing it. So it's that kind of contemplation, the weighing one hand in the other is what I'm talking about, dispassionately somewhat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous. And there's one other very interesting one. You say the source of change resides in the human being part of us and not in the doing part of us. Could you just elaborate that? There's a super one.
It's such an honor to have someone read my book and be able to talk to them about it. So this is really a thrill.
It's so refreshing. Yeah. So yeah.
So I was raised at a time, when I was in college, where books were written to help us contemplate our situation. They were written to help us think. And they treated human beings as living beings, not mechanical objects. And I miss that time because now books treat us as mechanical objects. They're how-to. This is a how-to book on this. That is crazy that we have a how-to on human behavior, right? Fix yourself in 1, 2, 3. Diet in this.
10 ways to get assertive.
Yeah, exactly. That's like applying a screwdriver to a human being. That is so opposite what we are, because living beings don't get changed. Every living being doesn't get changed through a screwdriver. We're too complex for that. We're too interconnected for that. So these ways of approaching people are approaching people as if they're non-living. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. There was a great thinker named Gregory Bateson, who talked about a living world and a non-living world. Non-living world is a rock. A living world is living beings where we all live together. We're all always changing. We all take in the world. We all produce something. And he said something very interesting, which is when you treat something from the living world as if it's a non-living being, the name for that is violence. And now we can talk about physical violence, but I'm saying this advice literature has a kind of violence to it, which is just do these things and everything's going to be great. It's also shaming. Oh, I tried those things and it didn't work. Something must be wrong with me. Something must be faulty about me, right? So you call that clutter. I agree it's clutter. It's as good as clutter.
So you tend to make an object of yourself rather than
you make an object of
an
yourself.
evolving human being. Yeah. So
and we live in a world where this process that we call dehumanization is extremely powerful, and this is part of that dehumanizing process.
Yes.
People walk around saying, "I need to fix myself. I need to fix myself." Well, those are messages we're getting from a dehumanizing world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my apologies if I'm not going with the flow of the book, as it were, but I've just some stuff that's the fear of hope is another big one. But before we get there, there's a parenthesis to your title. How we change and 10 reasons why we don't. So we won't go through all the 10, I guess, but give us a sense of what those 10 reasons might look like.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the truth about the title, which is I wanted to title the book The 10 Reasons Not to Change. I thought that was a really fun title. It would be like the opposite of a self-help book.
Right, the counterpart. Right? Yeah.
Right, it'd be the counterpart, but they wouldn't do it. They felt like it wouldn't sell. Like, who would buy a book on why not to change? Each one of the 10 reasons has to do with this issue called fear of hope, which is, if I do this, there's the potential of profound disappointment. And so I have to deal with that chance if I do this. So if I change, I'm going to raise my own expectations about myself. That's one. And then I could be disappointed in myself. If I change, the people around me are going to get excited for me. And then they're going to witness me failing, and I'll disappoint them. If I change, I'll start expecting more things out of myself, or others will, because I did this one thing, now I can do another. My son used to call me from college and to tell me he got a good grade on a paper. And I was like a smoker addicted to cigarettes. I could not resist asking the next question, which was, how about your other classes? So every time you change, you're raising this possibility of everybody's expectations going up and more chances for disappointment.
Yes.
And so that's what my 10 reasons are. They're about these situations you get in where you're afraid of some sort of experience where your hopes go up and then something bad happens.
Fabulous. So this
Yeah.
brings me to what you call in the book agency thinking. Taking responsibility for yourself, but more clearly, you say you are the final author of your life, right? And as I was reading, I had this associative thought of William Ernest Henley's poem, Invictus, which means unconquerable. And in that poem, it says, I am master of my fate and captain of my soul.
Yeah.
It sort of reverberated in my mind. So tell us about agency thinking. What is this taking responsibility, the aloneness, and all of that? Tell us that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that at some point we should talk about hope, and agency thinking is part of the concept of hope. But I'm going to
please flow. Yeah.
Well, but I'll talk first about this other concept you're talking about, which comes from the existentialists, which was basically that when we face the fact that our lives are in our hands, no one's life is perfectly in their hands. There's all kinds of forces against us moving forward in life. But on some level, we're responsible for our responses to that. When we face that, the experience we have is anxiety. Oh my Lord, I'm the one that has to make this work before I'm gone. And that creates terror in us about how to kind of control things. And the more you don't have faith in your own self, the higher up that anxiety goes. I'm actually not good at driving the bus that's my life. That's a terrifying thought because no one else is going to drive it. And so every time you move towards change, you're taking charge of your life. And that means at the same time, you got to look at the fact that you're accountable for it. So one thing you can do to not look at your accountability and not face an anxiety is don't change. Right? And so that's part of why you don't change.
Yes. I think this idea, I interrupted a flow. You wanted to say something more about hope. Am I right?
Oh yeah, I don't think you interrupted a flow. This is all flow. Play is always disruptions. Improvisation's always disruptions. That's the way it works. That's what makes it good.
Right.
If it wasn't disruptive, it wouldn't be alive.
So let's play with one more idea before we get to family business. All right?
Yeah.
Carl Rogers in your book. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
Well, I wanted to talk about hope for a second.
Yes, please.
To describe it, because I think it's important.
Yes.
So there's two things that happen when you hope. And one is agency thinking. People that are hopeful have some sense of belief in themselves or that the world's benevolent. They have some sense of what we call faith, right? The other is that they think of alternative pathways when they meet up with an obstacle. Okay? Those two elements are central to all collaboration. So I'm going back to that idea that what makes us most human is that we collaborate to invent. That means that hope is the very kernel of our humanity, because it's the thing that makes us human, because the thing that makes us human is the thing that makes us collaborate in service of invention. Now, when you hope, you're always appointing something in front of you as important that wasn't as important before you hoped for it. And you're always noticing that you lack that thing in your life where you didn't notice that thing until you hoped for it. So hope is a risk, because now you've made something important that you may not get. And the experience of not getting that is this awful experience of what I call helplessness. And that's why we spend so much time dealing with our fear of hope. And that's what the research is about, that fear of hope research.
Brilliant.
Okay.
So another one that struck me, there's a quote from Carl Rogers, is that when I accept myself just as I am, I can change. So you make a mention of it, and I was struck by that. Just tell us why you put that in the book and where it fits.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if I'm disrupting your flow now, because I know you wanted to get the family
No, no,
business, but I'll quickly,
yeah, yeah.
all change, it's fascinating. All change exists in a dialogue, in a dialectic. It's a both and. So for me to change, I have to say to myself, there's something kind of unacceptable about me. I want to change. But to change, you have to accept yourself. That dynamic makes it hard to change, because you have to do both things at the same time.
Yes,
And that's
yes.
why we talk about kind of radical acceptance as the way towards change. You got to kind of have this view that even the things that are unacceptable are acceptable. And that's what my book's sort of saying is maybe you should find those things, actually, maybe you should love those things. You got to send them off to a retirement home, but you love them. Instead of saying these are bad things, these are acceptable.
Yes. So tell us more. Tell us more.
About that, or
no, just about your book and
mm-hmm.
some corners of your book and some key aspects that we haven't talked about.
Well, I guess the one more thing to describe, and then I'm happy to move on to talking about family business or whatever, is that we've discovered that the worst place to be in life is, in some ways, is to have a lot of hope and a lot of fear of hope. That people that have those two things going on at the same time, they ruminate a lot. They're actually more pessimistic about the future than hopeless people. They think in very short-term ways, and they feel very stuck. So they're like high divers who are afraid of heights. And we can misinterpret somebody as in despair when actually they have a lot of hope. They're just afraid of acting on it. And that gives us a lot of room for different kind of conversations with our family members, with our patients, with our colleagues. Instead of having conversations about, let me talk you into hope, which is terrifying for that person, we have conversations about, you know what, I think you're afraid right now of this hope. That's a different kind of conversation. And that's kind of what the book's trying to help people do.
And then there was something about restraining forces and what's that, Levin? Yeah. What's that about? Yeah.
Yeah, this is very important for businesses. And this is, Kurt Lewin is the father of social psychology, but he's also really the father of organizational psychology. He is there's a place called National Training Laboratories, which is the place where people were originally trained in management, and he invented that. Yeah. So he had this, so he's sort of at the base of all thinking about organizational theory. And he had this very important view, and that's that we all live in our own unique fields, is what he called it. And our fields are filled with two things. One is forces restraining us, holding us back. And those are unique to each of us. Some of those are social forces, economic forces. Some of those are forces in the fact that we have weaknesses in our own psychology. And then we have these forces pushing us up. And those come from outside of our skulls and inside of our skulls. And where those forces meet, when they're pushing up against each other, that's where we are. So you got a plan to get somewhere and you feel stuck. You're stuck not because you're all the way down here and you're not going anywhere. You're stuck because the things pushing you forward are being pushed back by the restraining ones. And our job is to figure out, how do I weaken these restraining ones, or how do I strengthen these other ones? But the fact is, it's unique to each of us. So again, advice doesn't quite work because advice doesn't fit that problem.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a quick example. I had to give feedback to an employee, and I was in New York City, and I hate giving feedback to employees, and I was really resisting doing it, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do it that day. And I usually talk myself out of giving feedback. I'm not good at it. And I got on an elevator, and someone spilled some coffee on the elevator. And the people in the elevator just did this remarkable job helping the person with their coffee. They came up with all these ideas and what do we do about the spilled coffee and all of that. And they were making jokes. Someone got off the elevator at one point and said, same time next year, let's meet here to celebrate our our coffee spilling event. I got off that elevator and I was very ready to give that feedback. Now, why was that? Well, something changed in my field. And what changed was kind of this sense of affection for humanity, right? This sense of connectedness. If that hadn't shifted in my field, I might not have given the feedback. And that's why on one day you might say I can diet, and the next day all of a sudden you're dieting, because something shifted in that field. So those fields are a little bit mysterious too. That's the sort of Lewinian view of change. It's very important in organizations.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, let's change gears to family business, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The framework of our symposium is family business.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you connect the dots? How do you connect the dots? What is it in your proposition and propositions, if I may say so, that are relevant to family business, and how will family businesses benefit from understanding this at a deeper level?
Well, I'm not sure anybody's going to benefit from my book. I just, I have more humility than that. But I think that what I understand about family businesses, because I've been working with family business firms here in the United States, is there's a lot of discussion about legacy. And in the legacy area, what are those discussions actually about? And when do they get to the point where they're contentious? I believe it has to do with issues of hope and issues of faith in each other. And that's the unsaid event on the table most of the time. These contentious experiences become about each other's personalities, and they become sort of these difficult places. Instead of it being about, we're all sharing in this event about our fear of hope and our sense of where we want to go. And I think that having more clearer and direct conversations about hope and fear of hope creates a bond. Now, each person might be having a different experience about hope in that situation, but you can discuss that. Instead of saying, something's wrong with you or something's going wrong here, it's that we're all dealing with our anxiety about this hope. So that's one area. The other area is, I do think that organizations and organizational leaders do best when they're thinking about the complexity of hope and how to keep hope going in their organizations. I think that motivation's always connected to hope. And so if you want to keep people motivated, how do you do that in a way that respects the fear of hope, not just talk about hope? So those are two areas, but I'm happy to answer questions about that if you have other areas of family business that you want to discuss.
A question, in one of the sessions, in the first one, we were talking about the new generation, the next generation, millennials, family use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They seem to bring in a lot of positive energy into family businesses. They bring in ideas and all of that. So is it that they have more hope and less fear of hope than the senior people who've seen it all, done it all? What's your take on that? Yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, that's it. I just wanted to.
I don't know how to answer that. All I know is that I've been really impressed by them. I've been really significantly impressed by if you think about Gen Xers, they present with two things: this sense of their own faith in themselves and their right to things, and their willingness to think about creative ways to get around things. I just named hope, alternative pathways, agency thinking. So it does feel like they're a very hopeful generation in a lot of ways. They're living in a time where things don't feel too hopeful, but I have a lot of hope in them. The remarkable change that has happened in the United States regarding racial justice has just been profound. And that is run by that generation. I mean, a switch has been flipped in this country. And so they're an exciting group that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So how should senior generation respond to this vitality and hope? In fact, it's a more general question as well. When you are hopeful and you're at the current, this ambivalence of fear of hope and hope, how do I respond to you? Because you talked of collaboration. So is there something I can do to, partner you in that ambivalence, if I may use the term?
It partner you in the ambivalence about the fear of hope?
Is there some way, how does one respond? Let's say I am caught in the, dichotomy or whatever you want to call it between hope and fear of hope.
Yeah.
So what would you say to me? How would you relate to me?
Oh, yeah, I would want to lower the negative value on fear of hope. So I want to have a conversation with a person where I'm saying, well, tell me why you don't want to do this. Your reasoning makes a lot of sense. You want to stay the same because you don't want to risk this feeling that you get when things don't go right. That has a value to it. You're taking care of yourself, right? So staying the same makes sense. Now tell me about why moving forward makes sense too. Now let's have a conversation about which direction you want to go in. That's a better discussion than saying, oh yeah, you're afraid of moving forward, and that's, you got to get courage to move forward. That doesn't really help, right? It's like trying to find the way to kind of love that part of them that's staying the same, because it's in that balance where they'll probably make the decision to move forward. We're built to grow. We've just got to remove this shame about staying the same to allow us to grow.
Right. Okay, so let me change gears again. You have dedicated your life to mental health and addiction. You run robust community integration programs, helping individuals to recover in their own communities outside a hospital or residential settings. This is a very, very key part of your life's mission, as I understand. Please elaborate that and tell us whatever you can about this work that you do, or this orientation.
Yeah. So if you go back to what happened to me in my childhood, I just want to very quickly give you a metaphor, which is that the schools recommended that I go to special classes, that I get separated from my friends. This was at a time where they didn't mainstream learning disabled kids, and my parents resisted that. So I learned something very important, which is sometimes the cure is worse than the problem. And I'm convinced of that in the United States, that a lot of what we do to help people with psychiatric issues hurts them more than helps them. We remove them from their communities. We remove them from the very place that makes them most human, which is their connection to other people. We over-medicate them. And I believe that a lot of what we see in these people that has to do with motivation has to do with the injuries that have happened to them socially because they have a psychiatric issue, not because of the psychiatric issue. And their unwillingness to engage in treatment has to do with those injuries too. And their unwillingness to get help from their families have to do with those injuries. So my work is about how do you help sort of treat them, because they do sometimes need medication, they need therapies, but keep them out of these institutions, because I think that those institutions hurt them. They hurt them because they're an industrial model of care, not a living systems model of care. They're treating them as things, which hurts people, not as living beings. And so when I talk to people who think that the United States is a great example of how to treat mental illness, I get worried, because I don't think it's a great example. We have more treatment in this country for schizophrenia than anywhere in the world, and we have more schizophrenics. So something's going wrong, right? And as our medications have gone up in use, so has the amount of people who are on the disability rolls because of psychiatric issues. So something's going wrong. And instead, we should be thinking of them as whole beings, including and especially their social being. Where do they rest in that world? So for me, it's all about, in some ways too, people who have experienced profound disappointments and are afraid of hope, and that's why they're kind of not moving forward.
Related to this, our society tends to stigmatize mental illness. So how do bring these two, things together?
Mm-hmm.
Cure in
Mm-hmm.
whatever, in communities, but the communities themselves tend to stigmatize mental illness. So
Right. I mean, it's a very complex thing. The science shows, by the way, that ostracism affects the same part of the brain that pain does. And so ostracized people are walking around in literal pain. And they're trying to function with this pain happening in their brains, because pain tells you you're outside the group, you're in danger. So it's tribal. It's trying to tell you you're in trouble. Purposeless people can't make their lives work. It's just anybody who lacks purpose. If you don't have social support, it's very hard to move forward. These are the things that happen to people with psychiatric illnesses because of stigma. And then they get described as more ill than they are. The results of stigma get described as part of the illness. So, I do think that part of fixing mental illness is to keep people integrated in the world as much as possible, not to hide them from the world, but for us to accept their differences. If we spend too much time saying you shouldn't stigmatize them because it's a brain disease, which is what we do in the United States, that has real problems, because the human species invented stigma to kick people out of our tribes that are diseased. So it's sort of a crazy thing we do in the United States. It's a brain disease, so don't stigmatize them. That's stigmatizing. So we need to find a way to include people in our lives, to have them in the workplace, and to accept their differences. And by the way, many of those differences are gifts. They're not necessarily dysfunctions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that what you'll find with many of the people that own family businesses, those people are outliers in this society. To be an entrepreneur is to be an outlier. And by the way, large amount of entrepreneurs, I'm proud to say, have learning disabilities, have attention problems. So some of these things that get diagnosed are actually gifts. They're a bipolar disorder. I've never met a dumb person who has bipolar disorder, right? It's sort of, there's a brilliance to it. And we end up just medicating people and defining them as wrong instead of seeing where the gift might be too.
So let's move to some, we have a few minutes to go. Let's move to some questions here. So let me pick up one. I actually haven't understood all of it, but here it goes. How much percentage can a life be documented within the current scope of advancement in documentation of life? Make sense to you?
Not quite.
Okay. All right. I didn't understand it. My ignorance has come in the way.
Yeah.
All right. There's another one. In my view, change is reversible. What we need is transformation. Transformation is something that your own past looks like someone else. Your views on this, Ross?
I think that's right. But for that to happen, there have to be shifts in our fields. And so it's a goal we should all try to achieve, but we have to recognize that there are forces that are holding us back from that, and we have to take care of those forces to get there. So what worries me sometimes about conversations about transformation is they make us feel like there's something wrong with us that we're not transforming, instead of recognizing that there are restraining forces in our lives that hold us back, and we have to take care of those restraining forces. Because once those restraining forces are gone, it's all about transformation. We are living beings, and living beings grow. That's what they do. But to get to that takes work. And we have to be forgiving of ourselves that we're not transforming at this moment. We have to recognize that life is not this easy task, you know?
Another one is fear of change due to an inherent inability to take risks. How does one address this?
I think we all have some fear of hope. I think that people where fear of hope really gets in the way of them moving forward have lost faith in themselves. And the best way for them to regain faith is to regain some sense that they mastered their lives. And so remarkably, the way to regain that has to do with something that you're good at. And it can be almost anything to start with, where you begin to see that you can control and master your life. Mastery, in a strange way, is the best thing you can do to help somebody hope. We really can't help people with hope, but we can help them with mastery. We can help them build their faith. And once they build their faith, they're not so afraid of what will happen if their hope fails them. They'll say, I can pick myself up. I can figure out a way out of this. And so that's really the answer towards rebuilding our capacity. I wouldn't say that a person who is afraid of hope has less courage than you and I. There's more restraining forces pushing against that courage. And those restraining forces have to do with the fact that they probably don't feel like they can master their lives.
In family business context, what is the difference between transformation and change? I think we've touched upon it, but in the context of family business.
Well, I guess I see, when I think about change, it's often about transformational change. But I think in family business, there can be ways in which you make small adjustments or you make some sort of decision that changes the way things are done. But when you're talking about transformation, it's changing of a worldview, a collective worldview, a collective sense of how things are in this family. That's the transformation. So that has to do with sort of this event where mythologies get lost, with how the family works, ideas that we only work this way stop, and where there's more play. There's more play with ideas and who we are. That's the transformation.
Yeah. Another one, the only constant thing in this universe is change. Please elaborate this, but there's another one. Is your book translated in Mandarin? If so, please send us a copy.
The first issue,
yes,
is right, and I want to say something about that.
Yeah.
This is the other beautiful thing about hope, and why hope is so central to our evolution, which is hope doesn't exist in certainty. There's no hope in certainty. If you're certain about something, you're being optimistic, and optimism is a cheap emotion. It's an easy emotion to generate. Hope is the thing we feel about the future when we're uncertain. And that makes it perfect for a world where the most constant thing is change, right? It's the thing that gets us through that. And we're the one animal that doesn't survive just on its instincts. So everything is uncertain to us. And hope is the thing that's driving us through that. On the other one, it is being published in China, but I don't know in what language. And that'll be next year. So that the international publishing happens next year. And then that's all been disturbed by coronavirus. But yeah.
So, your what you just said about certainty and so on reminded me of something a very wise man told me. I have no certainty and I have no doubt in life. All right. So another one coming up. Does early childhood sow the seeds for building a growth mindset, which is critical for moving outside your comfort zone?
So this answer is going to show you how devoutly I believe in hope. In the United States, we talk a lot about attachment, that early attachments with your family are the things that give you the ability to be resilient and have fortitude. And I think they're using the wrong word. I think we're talking about hope. That an infant, when it reaches for its parent, is hoping for something. And when it doesn't get it, it's feeling like it can't manage its own life. It's feeling like it's helpless in getting its needs met. And that's the exact feeling we have in adulthood when we don't get what we want. And when you've been through repeated experiences of trying to get what you need as a child and not getting it, that begins to make you feel like you don't want to move forward anymore, right? So fortitude is directly connected to the hope, to our hope being actuated in infancy. And we know that, every parent knows this. A child is not passive in their parents' gaze. A child is making things happen. They point, they giggle. They're trying to get something going between the two of you. And when we're not responding, we're showing them that they're not getting their needs met. I don't know if you know about this this syndrome that's going on in Sweden right now for Syrian refugee children. But it's a very sad but very interesting event, which is these Syrian refugee children, when their parents go for asylum and they don't get it, and then when their parents try again for it, they go to sleep and they end up falling asleep for years. This is called resignation syndrome. They basically stop because they can't hope anymore. So this is a person who's been through all kinds of tragedy, all kinds of problems. They're now in this safe country, and this is the point when they shut down because they can't bear hoping anymore. And the remarkable event that happens is when parents are able to get asylum, the children wake up. And they wake up because something in their parents' behavior, the way they touch them, the way they act around them, they can feel on their bodies is expressing hope, and the children begin to wake up. And so hope and the capacity to hope is central to our being in infancy and all through childhood.
Yes, and here's another one. Is talking about hope, in talking about hope, how do we deal with the hopelessness of hope as witnessed by Sisyphus, who has been sent to roll a rock all the way up to the mountain, back and up again and up again?
Mm-hmm.
Sisyphus.
Yeah. Well, that's what hope is built for. It's built for, it didn't work this time, and now I need to try again. Martin Luther King was a profound leader about hope, but he talked about creative suffering and suffering being redemptive. That even in the act of these events that are bad, you can be creative with it. You can make something out of it. And that's really what hope is, Now Sisyphus, I'm not sure if Sisyphus was hopeful because he didn't look for alternative pathways. Why didn't he roll around the rock? Why didn't he dig under it, right? Sisyphus might be an example of actual despair, that he just keeps trying, but he's not figuring out an alternative way around this. That's really hope, right?
In the context of family business, would you say that the senior generation represents the fear and the next generation hope? Is in that they resist the hopeful energy that the next generation brings in? Can we generalize that? And any thoughts on that one?
If the older generation is not respected as having achieved what they've achieved via hope, they've got no lesson. They have no lesson to teach their children. It just looks like accomplishment. It doesn't look like somebody who struggled and succeeded at the anxieties and fears of hoping. I mean, entrepreneurship is an event in which you take a massive risk in your own faith in yourself. And that event should be passed on to the children. Otherwise, what it looks like is the children are the hopeful ones and the parent is sort of this fearful one. But this is a person who's achieved something because they've struggled with hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are experiencing a lack of control over the situation during the pandemic, and this can prompt feelings of self-doubt. Would you advocate that these are times when we need to be surrounded by change-hungry people?
Well, yes, and hopeful people. And people that can give us a sense that there is a time perspective in front of us. Okay, this is also Kurt Lewin. In other words, some leaders who are telling us in direct terms what the next step is, whether that step gets achieved or not. The leader comes back and said, we tried this, it didn't work, now we're going to try this. But that's done in units, so we feel like it's not chaos. We feel like there's some sense that there's some control going on regarding this, some movement forward. Sadly enough, in my country, that's not happening. I don't know about in your country, but we're not getting a clear message of the steps that are taking. And in that chaos, we feel like we're really out of control. Now, on the other hand, haven't we done a remarkable thing, most of us? We've changed in ways never expected that we could ever do in our lives. And we should be celebrating that and recognizing it. That if we can do that, there's lots more we can do as a group to kind of take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Do you think that there is too much focus on doing rather than being, which would help to overcome fear of hope?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We are doing animals, but we're also being animals. And we live in cultures where the being part of us, kind of the core of our soul, is not the thing we're working on. We're working on action. And so again, that comes from a dehumanizing culture. We're cogs in which we just fix a few things and we'll do a better job. And we recognize ourselves as part of this machine that we're contributing to, instead of recognizing the most important thing is to work on this inner experience, you know?
Yeah.
Because doing should be getting us satisfaction in here. And I'm going to say that again, because what that is play. When I'm bringing something of myself into this, and it's me coming out, and I'm not performing, the event that happens is playful. And that's what we should all be working towards, is these playful experiences. Not that playful experiences aren't serious. Great things come out of play. All great things come out of play, including social movements, including great inventions, including great work lives. So it's not a silly thing to play, but play is the place where we bring our inner life into action.
So on that note, we started with play. Let's end with play. We are just a little ahead. We just crossed our time boundary, just a little bit. So play it is, and expression, and reaching out, and hope. So thank you so much. It has been very enlightening, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And if I interrupted you at some points in time, my apologies. Namaste from Parampara Institute. Thank you. And it was a complete pleasure and delight, Ross. Thank you once again.
Well, thank you. You're an enjoyable playmate. I'm happy to do it again at any time. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody.
All right. Thank you very much, all viewers. Thank you for listening in. And thank you for all your questions and participation.